Today we have with us Sunil Bajpai, 80 batch, who will talk to us on switching tracks, adapting and thriving in a changing world. I would like to, I'm sure everybody knows, but Sunil is the first person who had taken lounge session into cyberspace about 2 decades ago by creating a chat group on yahoo.com. And the JAA has purloined his idea, and we have named this series of talks as lounge sessions. So, thank you, Sunil, for allowing us to expand the lounge sessions onto the Zoom. And I'll hand over to you to take this talk forward.
Thank you, sir. I am very excited to be here, and good morning to everyone. The lounge session doesn't belong to me. The name also doesn't belong to me, and therefore, of course, it's everybody's property here, and anybody is free to use it. And we can create lounge sessions in physical space in our homes if we want, and wherever we like. So that's very gracious of you to say, but it's everybody's property. Yes, it was indeed created a long time ago, the same year as Google itself came into being. So it's that old, and it was not in Yahoo groups, but actually on e-groups, a precursor to Yahoo groups where we started. So enough of that, and I've got a quotation here on the screen, which is of course only a humorous quote from Oscar Wilde. I hope everybody can see it and everybody can hear me. So I just want that confirmation if anybody can confirm.
Yes,
Yes.
I can see your screen.
Yes.
Yeah, we
We
can
Yeah.
see
can
it.
hear you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Uh, s- so I started thinking about this presentation to make today, the talk, and I wondered if it was possible to bring people together, the older generation, the other generations, and whether there is any value in all of them coming together. Just like the lounge session, this is not my original idea at all, and it was uh, Mr. Jail Singh who asked this question, and he asked whether I would like to do a talk which would attract the younger people as well and address their concerns. So I decided to take the challenge, and that's how I'm here. I want all of you, the young and the not so young, to focus on this gorilla for a moment. There is an old African proverb. It says, "You do not teach the paths of the forest to an old gorilla." I would like everyone to remember this graphic, this gorilla, and this African proverb. It's old. I don't know how much value it has, but I would like to argue that it has a lot of value. And and this will form the backdrop of whatever I have to say today. So please do remember this gorilla throughout. Now, why do we not teach the paths of the forest to an old gorilla? Why don't we do that? What is the proverb telling us? To my mind, this is about the gorilla's environment. The paths don't change much. The gorilla has walked them before, and you don't teach it because it isn't very teachable. It is, it knows its surroundings well. It's well equipped to deal with it. It'll survive in the tropical rainforests where none of us would survive very long. Its environment is dangerous and it's fully capable of dealing with that environment. But it is a kind word. It is dangerous but kind. It is kind because it doesn't change. And he is very familiar with this word. And that is why it doesn't need your advice or anybody's advice. This is what I want you to remember as we launch into to the to today's discussion. I don't want to call it a talk or a presentation, but rather a discussion. That's how I intended it. Uh, that's how that's what I wrote in the email to the invitation to all of you in the lounge session. That's what I also messaged to some of you. So, so I've divided my talk in three parts. Some reflections on the perceived disconnect that I mentioned earlier. Some advice on thriving in a changing landscape. That's actually the talk. The first one is not the first box in orange. And the third is creating a worldview to guide us to success. Now, the third one is not in the orange box because we are going to do it together. That's the experiment I would like to try. So I would like to finish at the second item here, finish speaking, and then we can continue the rest of the time and try and create a worldview that could guide us to success. And of course, there are two requests that I have to make. One is that you please interrupt me wherever you like, whenever you like. And if I don't know how to work Zoom very well, but you can possibly put a question in somewhere there if you want to, and those comments or questions will also, I think, be visible to me, and I might take them either during the uh, presentation or subsequently. So the orange one, the pink one, the first one, this section will be all pink colored so that you know when we are doing this. The next gray one on thriving in a changing landscape will be in the same color. The background would be largely in the same color. So you know what we are doing and where we are in the presentation, and that's very important if I get lost or start rambling. So here is a quotation. I had reached out to some of you, and this is a verbatim quote, almost a verbatim quote. I just edited it a little bit. This is what one youngster said in response to the mail that I had sent out. You can read it, but let me read it out aloud. We are apprehensive about speaking up, uncertain about our place in the job market, and how economic shifts would impact our lives if we left the security of government employment. And yet, the toxic workplace culture within the railways leaves me dissatisfied, even saddened as a professional. I often go to bed wondering, what have I done today? I find my peer group to be quite distant. Hardly anyone engages with others. The world seems to be becoming increasingly isolated. This is a depressing kind of thought for a young person to hold in mind. I have another response from another person, and I would refer to it later. But since this is the one main response I have, this is something that we need to understand a little bit more, in my opinion. So these are my reflections on the perceived disconnect. I did make a list of possible reasons why there is a disconnect between the younger generation and the oldies and shared it. And I got some responses, but not from the youngsters, except for the one that I put above. The most of the responses actually came from people who are closer to my age and significantly senior to me. And I got a fair bit of those responses, but not from the youngsters. Even though my own message and was addressed to the youngsters. So it does become important to understand what is going on in their minds and why is it that that we have this disconnect, although we don't seem to have this disconnect across other generations because they are speaking their message, their email. In fact, I thought maybe the younger generation doesn't read emails, so I sent out a WhatsApp message also to some people, but I didn't get any WhatsApp responses either. So I've divided this reflections portion, the first of the three portions, into four issues only, because we can't remember more than three or four things. And so this is about changing priorities, what has changed, and that might be the reason why there is disconnect. How has the workplace itself changed? And there will be obviously interplay between the priorities and the values and the change in the world itself. So workplace and education, those changes also will affect. There is a generational divide. So just a few points about generational divide. It's always been there. This is nothing new. I'm sure um, every generation has felt it. I have felt it, and I know that my generation has felt it. So that's all right. But you don't stop speaking. You don't. You express it to some extent or in some manner. And so how this generational divide plays out today is something maybe we can dwell upon, and how we can bridge the gap. This is uh, I am 11, so I'm 15 minutes into this talk. And these four things, maybe I can spend 10 minutes on discussing, and then we move on to the next part, where I would share my suggestions on how you can navigate the changing landscape. So, how are the priorities and values changing? First is the focus is on survival and the uncertainties. That was there in the quotation, if you remember, from one of the youngsters. There are economic changes, there are technological changes uh, in life, in the way we interact with people. And that youngster said they feel isolated. Yes, it's a widespread feeling. So it happens that the economic and technological change affects us, and we are still discovering how it will affect. The traditional advice is outdated, and it is indeed so, and we'll see why and how. The first thing is, if you remember the gorilla, his the gorilla's environment didn't change very much from birth to death. Now the change is much faster, and that is one reason why experience or advice is less relevant. And in ways and in which way it is less relevant, we'll see as we go along. Then there is a shift in ambition and values. The world has to offer more today, more experiences, more material possessions, more options in life. Um, when my generation or the one before me probably joined, there weren't many options outside the government. That started changing, opening up around the 90s. So people who joined before the 90s thought that the government was a stable place and offered a good life, and it was a good career choice. Most of my batchmates, except for one or two, actually left their IIT courses and came here because this seemed more attractive and certain and all that. Some of those reasons still remain because I've talked to youngsters while posted in Jamalpur, and their reasons are similar, and many of them have also left good institutions. So that attraction remains. But what has changed is that they see a very different world outside, and the primacy of the kind of job that you did once is not there. and and the shift in ambition and values also means that the traditional career path is not a fixed path or something that that's a given or will not be questioned because the youngsters question the work-life balance. They question the workplace environment and what they want out of life, and that's perfectly fine. And it's a reality. Everywhere, youngsters are making that kind of you know decision. The third bullet you might find slightly surprising if you are what is renewable energy dilemma doing on this screen of changing priorities and values? And we are talking about a disconnect and why there is a disconnect. And why this renewable energy dilemma? This is here because one of the two responses I got from the youngsters, the second one was focused only on renewable energy. And it made me think that when I joined, this wasn't really a question. Nobody had it at the top of their mind. In fact, I remember when I first heard about the IBM PC, it was in a magazine, and I was already in Jamalpur by then. And it was the Time magazine that announced the arrival of the IBM PC. So it was that far back, and and therefore all of what is dominant today in the world is different. And therefore, probably I don't understand the concerns and the and the and the concerns of the young. And climate change is indeed on top of their mind. It has affected them. Coal has gone out, diesel has gone out. Everybody talks about electricity. Even that is has a problem. And even today, when you talk about AI, you talk about how it consumes energy and how we are not going to survive. If the world is not going to survive, that certainly should be the number one priority, and and all our values must be linked to it. So if you don't see it like that, if you don't see it as an immediate problem to consider, then we, like me, I also would not have put it on my own over here. Then it does mean that we are out of touch with the world that the youngsters inhabit, and their fears are different from the concerns that we have in our minds. I have no answer to the question that the youngster made. He asked a very specific question about what should be done or should not be done. I don't know that, but I have general remarks to offer, which I think may be useful to him as well. If he is in the room, I have not yet had a look at all the names in the room. So let's move on. The evolving workplace and education. Here also things have changed. There is AI automation. There was no such thing in my time, and there is a demand for new skills. I would question a little ahead whether there really is a demand for new skills and what those kind of skills could be. I got a very nice long perspective from Mr. Virdi himself on what is the educational disconnect and how do you train for employability, what is practical, and where is the gap between the education and life's requirements. And he wondered how the job scene has changed, and that will obviously affect what people can do if they want to shift their careers, if they want to shift tracks. So there is a disconnect, and not a disconnect. There is an evolution, and there is a change, and there has to be a way to deal with this change. Now, I just want you to reflect back on that gorilla that you saw, which I asked you to remember. The gorilla's world has changed, and therefore it needs to find something new to do. It's not obvious what that is. And if we jump to conclusions that the sandwich scheme is better, and we have opinions about how it used to be so good, and we just need to make a little bit of a change, maybe we are missing the entire point. This shift is huge, and and We need to think about it, and I'll have some comments to make. There are also cultural and social shifts at work. I'm not talking about home and other places, even at work. And I don't want to make too many comments about that, but let's recognize that it's there. Then there is the generational divide. It's always existed, and the irrelevance of experience when new challenges require new perspectives. This reminds me of a meeting, the first diesel maintenance group meeting. It used to be important at one time. I don't know if it is still important. I I, I attended that meeting and I heard one very senior person there um, say that he had attended almost every single meeting of the diesel group. It was very impressive that he knew what he has what how it has evolved right from day one when the maintenance group was formed. After some time into the meeting, he said that you guys don't do this, guys don't do this, and this is wrong and that is wrong, and a whole lot of things he dumped on us. And I thought that I am attending my first meeting. I haven't done all of this. You have done all of this. You attended all those meetings. So if these meetings have not achieved their purpose, don't ask me. Ask yourself. And therefore, the point I'm making is that there is a misalignment and there is even irreverence towards experience. Well, if you think this hasn't worked and you are the one who have all the experience making it, trying to make it work, and it doesn't work, and we agree it doesn't work, then why? How am I responsible? And what use is your knowledge or experience? This is an unkind thing to say, and not entirely true either. This isn't true, but it's a thought that occurred to my mind, and I'm sure similar thoughts come into the minds of youngsters today. And that may be the reason for why such a dark first quote that I showed you. The motivations are also misaligned, which is different from experience. You see, my my memory of what I wanted to do and what I actually wanted to do are both very different from what people want to do today. So their motivations are different. And because the motivations are different, the young people feel unheard. That's on us, but it's also on the young people. They have to um, uh, be able to express their viewpoint, and we will have something to discuss as we go along. Then there is the fear of vulnerability. Hesitation in opening up creates barriers, and there are concerns about judgment and reprisals. And this is real, and I know it, and all of us know it that this is true. It's not easy to speak up. You do need to speak up and express your viewpoint. Sometimes the viewpoints are very different. So let me share another anecdote from the days of Mr. Dasrathi. He was in a meeting, and all the senior folks were in the center, and all the youngsters were in the periphery of the room in the Northern Railway, and he had come from board to do this meeting. And I was in the board at that time, so I was also on one of the periphery chairs, and as a youngster, of course. So there was an entire conversation in the middle of the in the middle circle, and people expressed their opinions, and the conclusion was reached. One conclusion was reached, and that was considered to be the best way forward in the interest of those who were sitting on the periphery. So, as he was a very democratic person, Mr. Dasakti, and he just made one last comment. So, okay, fine, this is good, but maybe somebody still has something to say. And I took the liberty of raising my hand, and I said, "Sir, you've heard all the people sitting in the center, and please also listen to those who are sitting in the periphery, because it's our future that you are talking about." And so he went around the youngsters in the periphery. And the conclusion that we reached was diametrically opposite of what we should be doing. So there can be that much of a disconnect between two generations, and it's always been there. It will be there in future, but this fear of vulnerability cannot keep us from not speaking. And I could, of course, speak because in day-to-day basis, I would have to speak to Mr. Dasati, so I could muster the courage to say. But most others who were from the Northern Railway or other parts, but youngsters, they would not have they would not have spoken up. I would not have spoken up if I wasn't already working with him for a while. So how do we bridge this gap? The basic values change at a glacial pace. This is a thought that comes from Ramana, 84 batch. He wrote to me, like I told you, people of 80s and more senior have sent far more emails. And it's a very nice mail that he has written. And he says that the basic values change very slowly. So they will provide the common ground. While the context changes, the core principles are timeless. And therefore, uh, that's where the bridging can happen. And balancing traditional wisdom and what's happening today, the innovation. How do you blend experience with new skills? He's got some good points to make, and I've borrowed from those. Uh, and in the next part, I would talk about it. And new purposes post retirement. He brought up a very interesting point, which is that people are living longer, and my generation might still have a fair bit of time, and we may be healthy and totally capable of being engaged in work. So we might opt for a second career. Now, the moment you opt for a second career, all those who are about to retire or have retired, just think about it. Your drivers are now similar to those of the younger generation. You need to understand the world. You need to find what is your purpose now post retirement, and how would you deal with it. And maybe that is a better way to connect with the younger lot. And therefore, this second career opportunity actually does force us to think and uh, and uh, and bring us closer to those who are struggling perhaps with similar kind of issues in their minds. So this is an opportunity for intergenerational collaboration. That's what is my last point. But so far, and I'm at 11:30. I've got a clock here. This is about why there is a gap at all, and why we need to address it, and how we could possibly address it, and what my reflections are about this gap. And this is part of the reason for this talk, which is to get the youngsters engaged, and that's why that part existed. Now I want to share thriving in a changing landscape. What is it that that we could possibly do? So so here it is. Now remember the gorilla from half an hour ago, and please remember all those uh, uh, all those reflections that I've shared in between. Remember the quotation that I shared as well. Now, what we need to do is look at how do we embrace change? How do we become uh, adaptable? How do we balance risk and resilience? This is important. There is a risk in speaking up, and it's very real. And simply saying that don't speak up is not an option. Third is about maintaining initiative and agency. That's a piece of advice to youngsters. And fourth is about staying grounded to principles, and that is what Ramnath mentioned, which I briefly talked about earlier. So these four things, again, like I divided the earlier part into four, the middle portion is also divided into four things only. Now let's get back to this. Now look at the right side. we said that the world is stable and therefore you can deal with it. But world has never been static. It has changed. Its pace of change may have been different, but that doesn't matter. Life started as unicellular organisms, became multicellular, marine life, plants, animals. All of this happened over hundreds of millions of years. It was genetic adaptation followed by intelligence, emergence of intelligence. First, rudimentary sensory motor intelligence of birds and bees and mice, and then human level intelligence. And maybe we are headed towards super intelligence. I know some of you would be immediately appalled by the idea of super intelligence, but hold on. Uh, this is the right side, what I've written here. And now look at the left side. Thinking is energy intensive. In fact, human level intelligence evolved only after we discovered fire because we could cook the food, and the cooked food was actually kind of digestion, pre digestion, which allowed us to extract all the nutrients and specifically energy to make the brain function, which consumes anything from 20 to 25% of the entire energy. So thinking is very, very energy intensive. Now, as we evolved, what did we do? We didn't want to think that much. We don't want to think that much. It's too energy intensive. So we substituted thinking, actual thinking for heuristics. If the world is relatively stable, you can have quick thumb rules and you can make a quick determination. This is where where we were 10,000 years ago. There are dangers in the environment everywhere. There were dangers in that gorilla's environment. There were dangers, similar dangers in our environment as human beings, and we needed to make quick determination. So this cat is it thinks that it's an animal and a tail, but it isn't actually. This is just a rope. So, but it'll make a quick determination about what it is and whether it has to attack it or do whatever it needs to do. So there were dangers everywhere. There are dangers today. I spoke about dangers. There is never any reason to rethink if if the environment is stable, with gorilla's environment. Therefore, there is emergence of such things as confirmation bias and desirability bias. Confirmation bias is that when you when you accept information more readily or you say things that confirm what you already believe, and you don't want to change your mind, and therefore you have a confirmation bias. And there is also desirability bias, which means that there are socially acceptable, socially desirable things. We want to conform to that, and therefore we do those things. We say yes, we agree. We in our actions and thoughts we try to conform because we are social animals. So these are the realities. Thinking is energy intensive, and there are dangers everywhere. So we have quick answers, we have quick solutions, and we have confirmation bias and we have desirability bias. Now all of these operate when you give advice, when you accept advice, and when you think about it. We never evolved to think, we evolved to survive. And if you change your perspective in that sense, you would realize that we aren't very good at thinking, no matter what we believe. Human level intelligence is great, but it was never designed to help you think. It was designed to help you survive. And these are two very different objectives. Now, some of you would have thought, at least the younger ones would have thought, that the gorilla I was talking about is the one who's the old man, and his world didn't change, and he has static advice to give, the heuristics he has learned, and stuff like that. But remember, you are also the gorilla because genetically you are no different. You haven't actually evolved from what you were 10,000 years ago. So we are all subject to similar kinds of biases and problems in thinking. Because we have to use concepts to see, our observations are already contaminated. Use different concepts and you will see things differently. Why this is important, I will come to that. So we need a different mindset. Remember, this is the second part where I'm talking about sharing my thoughts on what I think is the way to shift gears or to change track or to do something different. So the mindset has to be curiosity driven and unbiased truth seeking. This is not easy at all because our thinking was not designed for truth seeking. It was designed for survival. It is based on accepted heuristics. It's not based on careful evaluation of evidence. And therefore, in a changing environment, we need to change. We need to cultivate curiosity, flexibility, and open mindedness. If you don't do that, we go back to being the gorilla, and that is not the way you deal with a changing world, an unkind world. This is the way you can deal with a fixed, dangerous world, but a kind one. So here's a book by Julia Galef, The Scout Mindset, and she talks about it's more about probability than anything else, but it's interesting to read. It talks about the scout mindset. Scout is the person, you can see that person sitting with the binoculars, is the person who's trying to find out what exactly is happening there in the distance, and is the people who fight, the people who will do the battle are different. They will do what they know, but the scout is looking for what actually is, what is he able to find with an open mind, and we need to have that kind of a mindset. There was a conversation in one of the WhatsApp groups. I do not recall because there are multiple WhatsApp groups of SANS or mechanical, where somebody said that 2 plus 2 is always 4. And, all this bullshit about soft, um, you know, people with soft skills saying that 2 plus 2 is not always 4 is just that. It's basic arithmetic and it should be treated as 2 plus 2 is 4. But actually, that's not the case. If 2 plus 2 was always 4, we need to ask, what does 2 represent? Does 2 represent a 2-unit distance along a number line? Or does it represent 2 as the strength of a set with 2 members in it? The first one is called cardinality. The second is called, the first is called ordinality, the order in which things happen, the number line, and the second one is cardinality, which is the strength of the set. In neither case is 2 plus 2 equal to 4 always. It's only in school level, very elementary mathematics that it is 2 plus 2 equal to 4. If 2 plus 2 was always equal to 4, the speed of light would not be the absolute maximum that we know it to be. Distances can shrink, therefore 2 plus 2 can be less than 4. Time can shrink, and therefore 2 plus 2 units of time can be less than 4 units of time. Certainly, half the speed of light plus half the speed of light is not the speed of light. It will not reach there. So we need to look at things and accept them for what they are. Remember, we are not wired for truth seeking. We are not wired to uh, evaluate evidence. We are wired to use quick heuristics and knowledge to simplify thinking, to avoid thinking. 2 plus 2 is also not equal to 4 if you add sets together. Anybody knows A plus B is one set of 2, C plus D is another set of 2. If you add them together, it is 4. But if it is A plus B one set and B plus C another set, you add them together, it is 3, not 4. And therefore, this isn't true. When you start examining it, it is not true as an axiom. It's true under certain circumstances. And we need to do that as well. We need to question. our motives as well, the evidence, the point which has been made, and we need to reflect and review. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask, and it might appear like I'm pontificating to the youngsters, but I'm just pointing out that we are all gorillas and we all make the same mistakes and we think like this, and it's not very helpful. And when the world is unkind, which means the world is changing rapidly, this is not the way it works. So the more we can actually think, the better it is. The informed career changes. That youngster who said that they're afraid of change, and they don't know what it'll be when you shift from government protection of the government job to another job. Yeah, you need to ask: Are you running away from something, or are you running towards something? What is your motivation for doing this? This is not my thought. This thought comes from Professor Manikutty. He wrote to me and he said that we must ask this question of ourselves. And in his case, he said it was academics that he was running towards. And we all have different requirements, and that's great because otherwise all of us would be doing the same damn thing. We all have different requirements, but we should know what we are running towards. And that's why informed changes are important, and information and evaluation of that information is a mindset that we need to cultivate. Now, how do you balance risk and resilience? That was another theme that came up. We have to make survivable mistakes. We don't want to do things that could kill us, right? So if you are in a room and raising your hand would be viewed very, very adversely, and it could have a consequence you do not want to face, then don't raise your hand. First thing is to survive, and that's important. But it's also important to stick your neck out. So these are type 1 and type 2 errors. Type 1 error is error of commitment. You stick your neck out, but it was an error to do so. Avoid these type 1 errors. Be careful about it. And type 2 errors are you should have spoken, but you did not. And that's a missed opportunity. You should maximize these, but not at the cost of creating more type 1 errors. So please do not think that I'm telling you to go ahead and speak up and do all that. I know it doesn't work. I know your fears are real, and therefore stick your neck out by all means, but make them survivable, right? There is another thing I want to talk about here. Point number one, that losers, this is not something new that I'm saying, it's repeated over and over again in different words. That losers talk about winning, whereas winners know what they would do if they lose, but they don't talk about what they would do if they lose. That's the safety net. That is, you know that if you stick your neck out and something goes wrong, what would you do? If you don't know that, don't stick your neck out. But if you do know it, you don't need to talk about it. You can go ahead and do what you want, right? And this is general. It applies to everything that we do. And I want to point out that a good plan is not a strategic plan necessarily. Let me illustrate it with a 2 minute story about these two sailboats that are racing against each other. The blue one is the stronger team. They know how to sail. They are more experienced. They make better plans. They know how to plan a route. And this is a real story. In a head-to-head clash between the blue and the red team, I don't know what was the name. I've just given them blue and red colors. The blue team, which was more experienced and had every reason to win the race, in a head-to-head race, actually lost to the red team. And why it lost? Because the winds changed. The red team had a poorer plan because they didn't know better. The blue team had a better plan and they were more skilled and they lost. Now, this was a good plan that failed because good strategic plan. If you what was the strategy that went wrong or if you know what the strategy
Obviously.
have been, reflect on it. What is it that the loss of blue was not because of unpredictability of weather. It was because they were poor at the strategy to win. Since we don't have much time, let me give you the solution to the problem. The blue team actually should have simply sailed with the red team and had no other plans. They should have stayed ahead of the red team within striking distance. No matter what conditions, the blue would have won because they sailed faster. They are more experienced. They did not need a good plan. They needed a good strategy, which was never let red out of sight. And then you will always win because you're faster. That's the difference between a good plan and a strategic plan. But a strategic plan means you need to think, you need to evaluate the options. You don't need to act like a gorilla. The second is about intentionality, initiative, and agency. This is also extremely important. Let's go through the 3 points that they raised. Now, somebody with experience would tell you that you should draft the minutes of a meeting or first draft of the contract yourself. Why? Because it gives you a little advantage. This is valuable advice. And if you make the minutes yourself and then let your team review it or let the other party review it, the basic nature of those minutes don't change. Now you could adapt it to the current world, which is that you could write the minutes badly in the first round yourself and let the LLM make suggestions and redraft it. LLM, for those of you who don't know, is a large language model, the generative AI, the chat GPT that you're familiar with today. You only need to know how to prompt it well, and, and it does the work. In the next iteration, the future update, maybe in 2 years' time, learning to prompt would be a waste of time as well because you won't need it. It's like learning to search. Before Google, before those 15, 20 years ago when Long Session was born, these search engines were really directories. They cataloged all the information. You had to find the right way to find the information. Google changed it. They ordered the search in such a way using an algorithm that allowed you to find what you were looking for, even if you had not stated it that precisely in the first page. And that has created $1 trillion business. So the prompt engineering that we talk about, which is the flavor this year, is also going to go away the same in the same manner. So what would remain? The intentionality part is important. The initiative and agency is important because that is what will set you apart. Let me share this guy who is playing uh, tennis in the foreground, small graphic. It's to remind me about the commencement address that Roger Federer gave at this year at the Dartmouth, and he said that they and he said that you see he is the greatest of all time. Perhaps we know that he didn't say it himself. He said that he has won 80% of all his matches, so he's not perfect. And what's more, he won only 54% of the points, so just above 50%, and that has made him the greatest of all times. Intentionality and initiative and agency, these three things give you that 3 or 4% advantage that make all the difference between being average and being greatest of all times. And that is why this is important. Moving on, and this is borrowed from Ramnath. Stay grounded to the principles. Be human, which means be authentic and vulnerable, and realize that you need to struggle. Now, I want to dwell on this just for a minute. You are a gorilla, the one I showed you. You haven't changed. The world is changing, but you have not evolved. since the Neolithic period. Therefore, you are equipped with exactly what you had for your environment 10,000 years or 12,000 years ago. You do experience love, you do experience vulnerability, you do experience struggle, and you need to embrace it. Because if you don't, then you are not human and you are not likely to work very effectively or efficiently in the changed environment. Being vulnerable is not easy, and but it's necessary. If you try not to be vulnerable, if you block this out, you will block out everything else that is human about you as well. And that is the reason for feeling the disconnect, which was there in one of the earlier slides, which I shared from a youngster. The disconnect is there because when you try to, or the disconnect among them, my suggestion is that if you suppress one emotion, it will suppress the other emotions as well. And there is some evidence for this. So you need to, and you are also vulnerable because of the type 1 error and type 2 error that we talked about, the error of commission and omission. So you need to embrace vulnerability. You need to embrace being human. You are capable of a lot of struggle, so don't worry about it. Struggle is the least of all your worries. You were designed to struggle, and therefore be human and you will be more successful. And try to take away from your nature, and you won't succeed because that's not possible, because you're giving up all that you are equipped to do. About integrity and ethics, I want to make two comments. Very simple. It builds trust and guides decision making, so it's efficient. But more than that, if you think about evolution, and we talked about evolution in the beginning, the survival of the fittest is not simply the survival of the fastest or the survival of the strongest, but of the fittest. The fittest may be the deceptive one. So deception comes after strength and speed and such other characteristics. Deception is a way to survive, and so is cooperation. You are not you can defend yourself against deception only by having by cooperating with others, by building trust, and that is also part of your nature. That's part of your evolutionary journey, and therefore integrity and ethics are so important. Apart from making it easy for you to make decisions, you don't have to think too much about it. If it's unethical, don't do it. If it compromises your integrity, forget it. It's not worth it. Really, it is not worth it. And the diversity of perspectives. The third principle here is, you see birds of a feather flock together on the right side. So embrace diversity. And among that diversity of perspectives, choose the birds you want to be with. Look at the people you are with. Are they successful? Are they ethical? Are they vulnerable as human beings? What do they do in their life? Do they inspire you or don't they inspire you? If they don't, change your friends, change the people you work with. That's within your area of influence, and you can do it. And that's about agency, and that's about intentionality. So that's all I had to share, and I want to hear now. I have any comments about how we can create jointly a worldview for success. I'm going to switch off the presentation so that we can see all the faces and have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. I'll kick off with the first point which I wanted to make was that, yeah, in birds of a feather, I think you brought it around in the end, and really you need the advice that the sum and substance is that choose your friends and your company very carefully and stick to your ethics. That is, and after that, do whatever you like. I agree. That's what is required in a for switching tracks in a rapidly changing world. It, it, it sums up beautifully everything that you brought out. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you that
one
you
one
agree.
one more one more thought that came to my mind was that when we joined and our generation of Sams, I think we had a rough calculation where almost 50% had moved out of the major environment of the Indian Railways. Maybe PSUs, most of them had moved over to private sector. And I think that trend very much continues. I mean, there's no dearth of people switching tracks and
There isn't.
adapting,
There isn't.
and there's absolutely no reason for despondency. I find that first slide of yours was really, yeah, it took me a while to absorb that there are issues. I dare say that there are issues the that the youngsters may be facing, which we are unaware of. And
So,
so thank you. Let's
so,
hear
so
from somebody else.
yeah, sure.
Okay, Sunil,
Just,
first of all, thank you very much for your very enlightening talk, and it was very interesting indeed. But I'd just like to share a few thoughts with you.
Sir,
The first one is that the pace of change in recent times has outstripped mankind's capability of adaptation.
absolutely.
And that is something which is really going to hit us even more. In fact, let me just share with you what I told my grandchildren. I told them that yours is the first generation where the skills and the knowledge that you gained during your academic life would become obsolete before you retire. And that's another thought that I would leave you with. The other thing is that, you talked about climate change briefly. But let me just explain that what is going on right now is the extreme weather events that we are all privy to are becoming more and more frequent. What was supposed to be a once in a century event is now almost annual. So we will have to revise our thought processes regarding what constitutes growth, what constitutes a sustainable lifestyle, and whether we like it or not, this is going to be forced upon us. That is point number two. This in turn will require us to redefine what we mean by GDP growth, for example. Because right now, GDP growth is linked with increasing consumption levels. And this is something that we will have to rethink completely. The fourth thing is that, we are living in an increasingly polarized world. And polarization and politicization of everything go together. And how we navigate this world is going to be increasingly important. So these are some of the thoughts that I had, which I wanted to leave you all with.
can I briefly respond to all the points that you've mentioned? They are very, very important, and I would like to share one or two sentences and others. Sure, you said the change is so rapid that it has outstripped our ability to deal with that kind of change. Yes, and there are two solutions. One, that first we recognize it, and that's why I talked at length about why we are wired to do what we do and how we should be aware of it and how we should change it. So that change itself, see, human beings have achieved remarkable feats, and a person who cannot think very well cannot do this. As humanity, we have achieved. I mean, we could put a telescope millions of kilometers away and observe the birth of the universe. 14.6 billion years away. How did we achieve that while at the same time being too stupid to know a scam from a real message? Because the telescope didn't reach there basis somebody's gut feel. It reached there by using carefully developed tools that we know can and which have been refined and tested, and we know that this is how rockets work. We know this is how it happens. Whatever you may feel, this is how is the right way to do it. So the tools that we created have helped us achieve something which our little head is not capable of doing. The tools we could build were tools of Flintstone, right? But not the JSW. Similarly, while it may have outstripped our ability to directly think about it or basis our heuristics or gut feel, it is the same AI which is unleashing this problem that is also providing a solution. I mean, the claim by OpenAI was that they will have PhD level LLMs next year, end of next year, before end of next year. I'm very excited to see what they will do. What will they do for me? That's why intentionality is important. That's why knowing where you want to go is important. That's why that guy sitting at the beach, the graphic which I didn't talk about, is important. You mentioned climate change. Yes, this is not something we were ever designed to understand. Climate has to be stable, but we understand that it is not stable, and we'll have to find a way. Somebody is finding the way. When I mentioned and brought up climate change, it was because some of us think that it is somebody else's job, but it's not so. You also evidently don't believe so, and youngsters certainly don't believe so because their life, technology, everything depends on that. The GDP point is extremely well taken as well, sir. GDP being, I don't know what it means really. If all the prices go up by 10%, GDP has grown by 10%, not leaving any one of us better off. In fact, worse off, because those who don't have the money now are 10% worse off than they were before. So GDP is not a
Inflation
good
related.
measure at all, and we need to find other measures. I don't know what those measures are. But we need to think. That's why we need to stay close to who we are and how we think about it. Sorry, I seem to have talked a lot of time in these remarks, and I'd like to hear from others and other perspectives as well.
The Mr. Sehgal, sir, if you consider the medical profession, they have a system of continuous medical education. Throughout their career, they are updating their skills. So that is something that is, I think, mandated now for almost everybody. It's not just the medical profession. As you say that
Absolutely.
what we learned in college is not going to be relevant by the time we retired. That is applicable. That's what we should learn from how the doctors update themselves every few years.
And that might change as well, sir, because the doctors they learn to use new equipment and do scans, and now machines are reading those scans
Yes,
and
yes,
as,
yes, that's
as
part.
good or better than the doctors. So that
Yeah, that's
part of
part of.
retraining of the doctors may be no longer necessary. So what would the doctors do in the new world? They need to figure that out, and we need to figure that out as well.
They do that. The radiologist is outdated, but still you need a radiologist. He still is there to interpret the results thrown up. So yes, there is a lot of change and rapid change, and so the youngsters will have a certainly have a very much more exciting life, I would say.
Yes, exciting life, and they need to actually look back at not only a few years that somebody may be sharing some experience, but thousands of years also are useful in deciding what you should or should not do. That was one of the subtexts in what I shared. So we can learn together. Yes, absolutely. Any other comments or viewpoints?
We have now at 7 minutes past 12. So I don't
Yes.
know, Mr. Jay Singh, would we have time to
No, we
carry
can,
on?
yeah, we have enough time. We can carry on for another half an hour at least.
Sir, thank you. So if there's, let me see. We have record participation 33 or 35.
No, we crossed 40 for some time.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, we crossed 40.
Mr. Keshav Chandra was raising his hand. Please unmute yourself and then talk. Please unmute
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can
sir.
hear you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Sunil, Virdi, and my other colleagues here in the meeting hall, and of course my esteemed seniors, a whole lot of them are there. One, I'll start on a lighter note. I'll take you back to 1980. Mr. M.S. Gujral and Mr. B.B. Lal, both of them visited Amritsar workshop. And there was an ex-apprentice mechanic who had become a works manager there. And they seemed to know each other, Mr. B.B. Lal and this gentleman, one Mr. Mukherjee. And somehow they got into a rabid argument. So much so that ultimately Mr. Bibilal shook him off by saying, look, Mukherjee, you can't teach your granddad how to, he used that four-letter word. Don't mind if my Simi friends are around. Now, coming on a serious note, this is in context of that gorilla, this thing that you can't teach an old dog new tricks or the path for the gorilla. Now, you spoke about that there's been a whole lot of corrosive atmosphere. Believe me, with the support of my colleagues and juniors and amazing seniors, all through my long career, I found uh, railway is a very exciting place to work. And I didn't really need to change and turn and twist over the years. I had people who taught me man management. Mr. Vora, I can see is here. People who taught me the beauty of hard work. Mr. Harimon is right there. Mr. Jasbir Pal Singh, Mr. Anup Singh, who was my member at that time when I was senior DME Diesel Tughlakabad. Sunil, I'm not going to list out. Mr. Gandhi is there from rights, how they supported the divisions on the railways. I only wish to say that the atmosphere was very wholesome. I loved it. I agree with each of your points, but maybe for quite a few of us, it was you worked hard, you brought in results, and yes, there were anxious moments, there were serious moments, all that was there. There were moments when you were apprehensive about the unions, all that was there. But all these issues that you have raised, while I agree with them, but believe me, all of them you didn't really confront on a daily, weekly, monthly, or even an yearly basis. So I will disagree with you, Sunil. I know you're an amazing person with a brilliant mind, creative mind. I know you for last 40 years plus since the time you got into Jamalpur. But some of these issues, they are not gelling with me. That's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Sir, I totally echo what you're saying. That it's been an exciting journey for me. Being with the railways was a privilege. Knowing all the people that you have mentioned, all the seniors that you have mentioned, I have known them or worked with them or interacted with them. They're all amazing people. I learned from them. That is why, and that is why I feel a little sad that not everybody thinks today the same way. And it's not my thought. I quoted from someone else, and I shared a set of postulates, if I may say, with people, and the younger generation was less responsive than the older generation. I mean, they spoke more. Even those who are still working, they also have time and pressures and priorities of work, but they spoke more. So maybe we should recognize the disconnect a little bit, uh, and and I confess to thinking along those lines myself. There probably it was not the right way to think when I shared some of my own experiences and anecdotes. They may not have been the right way to think. One has to be open-minded about it. One has to be generous with oneself and others that there could be mistakes. But if this is the truth, then we have a little repair to do. That was all my point.
Yeah, fine.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.
Yeah, Sunil, on
Yeah,
this subject of disconnect, Mr. JL Singh and I, we've been discussing this very often ever
yeah.
since this concept of these talks came up. I think we may be overstating it.
Possible.
That's my feeling because The youngsters, we were also youngsters and we had our own lives to lead. I don't know how much, apart from the essentials which we needed to, we did not connect with our seniors as much, perhaps, or we had less options at that time. But today's youngsters have many, many things to do compared to what we had to do. And they have their families to look after. They have a lot of entertainment. They have social media to look after. They have friends. They have family, and they have their own sense of priorities and problems. So I think, let's not overstate this, that there's a disconnect between the seniors and the juniors. We should be aware of it. We should work to improve upon it. But let's not overstate it. That's my personal view, and I've been expressing this to Mr. Jail Singh also. So this, for example, today's talk, we have a few youngsters. The previous talk, we did not have youngsters. So it will catch on, I suppose, as the word goes around, and people are more receptive to that there's something useful to invest into in this 1 hour on Sunday. Sunday is a very important day for everybody.
Yes,
So,
sir.
well, that's the point I wanted to.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thanks, and I share your optimism about this, and I wouldn't have agreed to do this talk anyway if there wasn't any reason for being optimistic. So yeah, and I would like to lead them as well, and I would like to interact and join more of these in the morning and on Sunday mornings whenever I can. And I look forward to hearing others on many different topics. Some of them have been listed already.
Talking about the
Yeah, points.
disconnect, let me just relate a quote from Mark Twain. So
Sir,
you understand that it's not yesterday. It's a long ago quote. When I was 18, my old man was so ignorant I could scarcely bear to have him around. Now that I'm 21, I'm surprised to see how much the old man has learned in 3 years.
I can see Mr. Anand now on the screen.
Sunil,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Very thought-provoking. I would like to share this with the audience. Remember
Sir.
this. I asked in your reflected glory, you were voted as one of the best moderators in the whole world. And they were to give you this dairy and some other knickknacks, followed by a sumptuous lunch at the Taj. But since you couldn't make it, I deputized for you.
Sir,
So
sir,
I
the
still
credit doesn't
have
belong to me. It's a self-moderated group, and the credit belongs to everyone. Actually, I really do very little of moderation. Sometimes only.
You see, now I have graduated to what they call the war group, wiser after retirement. And now it's exactly 20 years since I retired. And I settled down in Bangalore, and I thought I'd share my decades of wisdom with the younger lot. We have a welfare, what they call the Residents Welfare Association, and I thought I shall be the guide and mentor and all that. But the reaction I got was, Mr. Anand, if you keep looking back while working forward, you're going to fall down. We don't want to hear any more of when I was at Jamalpur or when I was in Mughalpur or whatever. Okay. And you are completely out of touch with the realities of today. So, of course, I felt quite miffed that all my collective wisdom is not dawning on these youngsters. And I said, you are making the same mistakes that I made. I'm only trying to point out, please don't make the same mistakes. I agree, I have made a lot of mistakes. I would like to share them with you. So that's the kind of disconnect which is happening. My reaction to the, if I may come back to the railways, is that I think the type of diligence that used to go in, that used to be common in our times, is no longer there. People just take things for face value and they say, oh, let's move forward. again, coming to very specifics, we have stopped issuing completion drawings, for instance. We have stopped making as-made drawings. Simple things like that. And even more down to earth, there's no annual stock taking, whether it's of. So the general, when I say housekeeping, I don't mean getting the floor swept on. When I say housekeeping, our record keeping and our diligence is lacking, and people just take for, you mentioned renewable energy. Everybody is jumped on the electric vehicle. It's very nice, it's very sexy, and it's you feel it's a great thing. Wow, I'm going to get a Tesla next year. But it all depends on whether the energy is really coming from a renewable source or not. So I'm sorry to say, I may criticize the youngsters. They've all adopted the NIMBY attitude, not in my backyard. The fellow who is driving around in an electric vehicle, for a few days he should go to a place called Iklehara, which is in the shadow of the Nasik powerhouse, and spend a couple of days. And by the time he comes back, he'll be coated with soot. He would have his nostrils plugged with coal dust, and then he'll have to think twice about his super duper vehicle with, if you please, sunroof. Why do you want a sunroof in India here? I thought you were having too much sun. And then the sunroof opens and kids stick their heads out. It's all very cute. Until somebody from the upper deck of a bus spits on you. So, random thoughts. I think you have really given us a very thought-provoking thing. And one last comment. I've been reading a book called Sparks of Genius. You mentioned about how human intelligence has evolved and how we have invented things and all. So this book says that that process of evolution is going on in the background, but the real breakthroughs or the aha moments, they just occur. And whether you can actually cultivate your mind to reach more of the aha moments. So these are random thoughts. Thanks a lot for the
Thanks,
excellent.
sir. Thank you. And you brought up Tesla, a high-tech company that sends rockets and all that into outer space. And we know about Facebook, the high-tech company that everybody wants to work for. And the two CEOs of this company want to settle their scores by fighting a cage match. That's about as gorilla-like one can be. So we keep going back to who we are, but we are capable of achieving much more if we will be a little disciplined and use the tools that we have created, I think. So, so I thought I'll make use of.
Coming to what Mr. Keshav Chandra said,
Sir,
I have great admiration for Mr. V.S. Saigal. Not only because he's a fantastic engineer and a whiz at electronics and whatever, that he took the plunge, which I don't know how many of us would have dared to take such a plunge in his career, launched into something totally far removed from the railways, and made a mark in the international market. So whenever I go to hospital and I see a surgical needle, I say hats off to Vinay Sagar Sen. Many of us, most of us won't have that kind of courage. I myself, I had several opportunities to leave the railways and join the private sector. Most tempting was when I was working in New Patni Junction. Sushil Luthra will bear with me. NKJ or Narakund Junction, I got an offer from Maruti Udyog in 1982. But then some seniors, they said, यार रेलवे में जो प्रतिष्ठा है वो आपको मारुति उद्योग में नहीं मिलेगा. So that sense of pratishtha and all is what you have to get rid of.